I will start the recording and we will start off. We are in chapter 10 of Daniel tonight. And if you will, you flip over to Daniel chapter 10. We had a little detour last week. Just something that I had, just another one of those things like the Septuagint being in the Eastern Bible. That surprises me. Um, but it came as a surprise, and it came from the revival lessons. He didn't mean it to, but that I heard it and just couldn't get it out of my head that there are um, there are actually three divisions of after Pentecost, three divisions, and Paul kind of says it in First Corinthians. So there's the Jews, the Gentiles, and then the church. And of course, I can't let that go without going back to the Old Testament. And sure enough, from last week's discussion, there's a lot of mention of Gentiles aligning with the Jewish people back all the way to Egypt. So the church has sort of been foreshadowed in the Old Testament also, just like everything else. And it still enforces our need to understand the Old Testament because, like Paul has says, Jew, Gentile, and the Church of God, that was nothing new. He didn't make that up. That's something that had been foreshadowed for all of time. So the Old Testament, we need to understand it. We need to understand it. So do we have any questions from last week or anything that anybody has stumbled on and wants to bring up before we get started? All right. Um, so we said last week that the last part, the last part of Daniel, chapters 10, 11, and 12, those should be just one chapter. It's one long oracle. It's the final oracle from God through the angel to Daniel in the book, and we're going to kind of look at it that way, although we'll break it up over a week or two. But we want to sum it up as we come out of the ninth chapter of Daniel. The ninth chapter is the one that's really, really important because that's where the 70 weeks are. And Gabriel once again brings an oracle from God to Daniel and tells him about the 70 weeks. And remember, in that last paragraph of chapter 9, 70 weeks are decreed about your people and your holy city to finish. This is 70 weeks not about the church, not about Gentiles, it's about the Jews. And that's why our attention needs to be on Jerusalem. Watch Israel. Watch Israel because that's where the events are going to happen. They're going to come out of that part of the world. And Jeff brought us a a good a good news source also. We've mentioned several of them. Uh, don't believe what you hear from the mainstream media that's going on in Israel. They're not going to tell you what they're going to tell you what they think is going on. They're going to tell you what they make up also. I hate to say that, but they're going to make things up. But there are news sources that come from Israel. They some of them are Jews, some of them are Christian, but
Do
they
you
are on the ground there and they know what's going on.
do you
So go ahead.
who are the news source?
Um, Jews. Um, oh, what's the name of that one? And I can't remember the one that Jeff gave us. Jews for Israel, I think is the one. Let me write down that as a note too. I will put you together a list
Oh,
also,
thank you. Thank you.
and of news sources from Israel to watch for. Because I'm getting old. I don't remember things very well. Um, but there are several news sources that I flipped through just watching, and and that one that Jeff gave us last, he actually sent it out, the link to that news source that he listens to. Um, but listen to those trusted news sources, because those are the ones that are going to tell us what's going on there for sure. Oh, one of the ones the Temple Institute,
Okay.
uh, the Temple Institute out of Jerusalem. Those are the guys that are putting together. God bless them. They're putting together the plans to rebuild the temple.
Mm.
When that happens, things are
Mm-hmm.
going to speed up really, really fast.
Yep.
So be watchful for that. The, then the Temple Institute is not the only group that have in mind of rebuilding the temple. There are some small groups of rabbis that are making noise about that too. So it's going to be it's going to be something to watch in the near future, to watch
Yeah.
things going on. And this has to do with the 70 weeks of Daniel, the last part of chapter 9. In in my opinion, the 70 weeks of Daniel, actually the 69 weeks of Daniel, are the the size of Nebuchadnezzar's statue. Remember Nebuchadnezzar's statue? The gold, the silver, the bronze, and the iron. The Gentile kingdoms that have arisen through history to rule the world, where it should have been Israel. But due to Israel's stiff-necked stands, God has put them on the back shelf. He hasn't thrown them away like some people say. He's just put them in timeout. He put them in timeout. And he put them in timeout for 70 weeks. Gabriel told him how long the timeout would be. So he's put them in timeout and given the world over to the Gentiles, starting with Nebuchadnezzar. And Gabriel tells Daniel the final tally. 70 weeks are decreed. And he goes through it. It's divided up. There's some people say there's three divisions, 7 weeks, 62 weeks, and 1 week. I'm kind of the opinion that those 7 and 62 weeks are kind of put together. The Hebrew is not real clear. In my Bible it says, and this is the last chapter of chapter 9, or last paragraph of chapter 9, there shall be 7 weeks, then for 62 weeks it shall be built again, talking about the temple in Jerusalem, the rebuilding. The Hebrew doesn't exactly say that. Remember the remember Hebrew, no vowels, no punctuation. So it says 70 weeks and 62 weeks. So there's a lot of controversy whether they're talking about the 7 weeks being the rebuilding of the temple and then the 62 weeks being the stretch from the temple to Jesus's time. That's for people that like that kind of thing. Um, I look for the six goals that are in those first few verses there, verse 24 and 25. I look for those six goals that we went over. That's what I'm looking for. Like I said, the dealing with history, especially ancient history, is a lot of guesswork. So, some people say to the minute this happened. Yeah, maybe, but I, I'm satisfied that these six goals here have happened and are going to happen. There's one that's still floating around, and that's the anointing of the most holy place. So we've got this 70 weeks of Daniel that we're looking at in the latter days. And remember the latter days. And I repeat these things because that's how I remember things is I hear them repeated. I remember them. The latter days is mentioned many times in the Old Testament and in the New, in the latter days. But just like there are two appearances of Messiah that a lot of people miss, there are some, because there are two appearances of Messiah, there are two latter days also, because the latter days are messianic, um, are messianic. They describe the last days before the coming of the Messiah. That's clear in the Old Testament. But since the Messiah is coming twice, we have to have two latter days. If you only believe he's coming once, then one latter days. But he's coming twice. So there's two latter days. And Daniel's prophecy kind of God God and prophecy are difficult because the prophecies don't always separate them very clearly. It doesn't say here's step 1, step 2, step 3. And God does that for a reason. It's the same reason that Jesus spoke in parables. The people that need to know will know. The parables are deliberately mysterious because it's God's choice as to who knows. So when we look through here, we've got to pay attention and make sure, and especially coming in chapter 10, it's where it begins to get mashed up a little bit. And we have to be careful and read. Our big our big advantage here is that we are looking backwards in history and seeing how scary, just truly scary, Daniel's prophecies are in depicting exactly what happened through history. It's scary. Even though there may be 100 years off, just think of how incredible it is that Daniel described history because God told it to him. It is truly, truly amazing. So we look at this last part of the 70 weeks, and it describes the 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 cutting off of the anointed one. That would be Jesus' crucifixion, and the destruction of the temple and the sanctuary. And it says it will come in a flood, which is the Hebrew word doesn't necessarily refer to water when it talks about this this flood. If it says a flood of water, then you know it's a flood, and that's what they do. What in the great flood, that's how it's described. But this one just says a flood, which can be a big chaotic event, and that's what it's describing here. Its end shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be war. Desolations are decreed, and this is that prince who shall come and destroy the city. This would be the Roman Tiberius that led the Roman legions to siege Jerusalem in 70 AD. And he was a prince. When his father died, he claimed the throne of Rome. Um, the prince that shall come, the prince shall come, shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come in a flood, and there shall be war. Desolations are decreed. And he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week and for half a week, and he shall put an end to the sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abominations shall one come who makes desolate until the decreed end is poured out. This is a beautiful example of how the first latter days and the second latter days get put together. It's very clear that they're talking that Daniel is seeing, Daniel is getting from Gabriel the description of the Roman occupation, the Roman siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD, and the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. But when you read again, and once again, thank you that we're looking back in history. It says, and he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week and for a half a week, and he shall put it in. And the Tiberius did put an end to the sacrifice and offerings because he destroyed the temple, but he didn't make a covenant for 1 week and for a half a week. And the next one on the wing, this is the one that really shows you that we're talking about something else now. On the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. Tiberius never did the abomination of desolation. He did not set up in the temple an altar to another god, which is the abomination of desolation. Nor did he sacrifice, as Antiochus Epiphanes did, sacrifice a pig in the altar. He did not do that. He just destroyed the temple. But when we get to Revelation, we're going to find out there the Antichrist, the one that Tiberius is a shadow of, is prophesied that he will make a covenant with the nations. He will be deceitful and make a covenant and double cross them. And he will put an abomination in the temple, and that will be himself. And that's when the decreed end will come, and it will be poured out on the desolator. So we're looking at two different events here that are happening, and we get a view of both of them, but they're separate. So it's thank goodness we're looking back on history, because we can pick out now the difference. We've seen the first latter days, now we're looking to the second latter days. So it's easy for us to go in and pick that out. But for poor Daniel, goodness gracious, and we see what it did to him as we get to chapter 10. So here we go into chapter 10. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a word was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belshazzar. And the word was true, and it was a great conflict. And he understood the word and had understanding of the vision. That's just sort of an introduction. Now we go to Daniel. In those days, I, Daniel, was mourning for 3 weeks. I I ate no delicacies, no meat or wine entered my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all for the full 3 weeks. 3 weeks, remember that? On the 24th day of the first month, I was standing on the bank of the great river, that is the Tigris, and I lifted up my eyes. The Tigris River is not mentioned in the Hebrew. They're just it's a good guess, but it just says the great river. I lifted up my eyes and looked, and beheld a man clothed in linen, with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist. His body was like beryl, his face was like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and in the sound of his words were like the sound of a multitude. And I, Daniel, alone saw this vision, for the men who were with me did not see the vision. But a great trembling fell on them, and they fled to hide themselves. So I was left alone, and I saw this great vision, and no strength was left in me. My radiant appearance was fearfully changed, and I retained no strength. Then I heard the sound of his words, and as I heard the sound of his words, I fell on my face in a deep sleep, with my face to the ground. And behold, a hand touched me, and set me trembling on my hands and knees. And he, the angel, said to said to me, O Daniel, man greatly loved, understand the words that I speak to you, and stand upright, for now I have been sent to you. And when he had spoken this word to me, I stood up trembling. Now I'm going to stop there for a minute. Daniel is having now a vision, but this vision is not a vision that he's seeing. Well, it's not a vision that he's seeing as if I were looking at a television set, which is a type of vision where you see like a screen and you're looking at a show. This is a real vision. Daniel is in the vision because you see the angel touches him. So we talked about dreams being the the least the least, I don't want to say real, but the least um, impactful way that God communicates. Then we have a, a vision which you see, but it's not really there. You're like I said, you're like looking at a television set. Those are a little bit more impactful, but when you're actually in the vision, this is when Daniel falls to the ground because he's seeing things that are just beyond him. He's seeing things that are beyond him. And we look at this description of this heavenly being that is before Daniel. Now, Daniel is mourning for 3 weeks, and we don't really know what he's mourning for. You would say, well, he's mourning for his people being held captive, and they need to be released. Remember, in the first year of Cyrus's reign, he freed the Jews and sent them home. So this can't be what Daniel is mourning for, and a lot of theories are going around about it. The one that makes most sense to me is and a lot of people say, well, it's Nisan. This is the time of Passover, but Passover is not a a festival of mourning. That's Yom Kippur. Passover is more of a celebration. So it couldn't be that he was observing Passover or first fruits or matzah. He's not in mourning because of an appointed time. The best thing, the best thing I've heard is that he is mourning because the construction of the temple in Jerusalem, now 3 years along, is not going well. And we know that for absolute sure because if you go back and read Ezra and Nehemiah about the return of the Jews and the rebuilding of the temple, it is ugly. It is ugly. And it even says that in the prophecy right back here, right back in the 9th chapter, when it talks about the rebuilding of the holy place. It's not going to go well, it says. So Daniel, and that makes most sense to me. Daniel is mourning because he's getting news back from Jerusalem that the rebuilding of the temple is not going well, and he is in mourning for that. He's asking God to look in, to help with this rebuilding. And then he gets this messenger coming from God. So that's the story. And we look at this messenger, and when I first read Daniel a long time ago, I think, oh, you know, his body was like beryl, his face the lightning, flaming torches. This is either God himself or Jesus, one or the other. It's got to be. Look at that. That matches the description that the prophets tell us about when they see the Most High God. But as we get along in chapter 10, we're going to find out that this angel or this heavenly being that is there before Daniel isn't, it can't be God because he's having this this heavenly being tells Daniel of the problems that he's having. God does not have problems. God does not have problems. Jesus does not have problems. So this can't be Jesus. But when an angel, when a messenger angel, an angel that is supposed to come here and bring a message from God to a human, which it happens all through the Old Testament. Every one of you can do 5 and 10 examples. When an angel comes from God in order to punctuate the message, to make the human understand that this is not just a, a, a quiet word from God, this is God speaking directly to you. When this message is from God's lips to your ears, this angel, in my opinion, this angel takes on the appearance of God. That explains it to me clearly, is why this angel appears to be God and yet doesn't act like God. He appears to be God because he is carrying a message from the Most High God of utmost importance. And that needs to be impressed on Daniel. So that's my take on this. If you have a different take, if you there's a lot of folks that say that this angel here is a pre-incarnate vision of Jesus. And that is not uncommon. That is a fairly common interpretation. I don't think so. Just because what we get to in the last part of chapter 10. But think about that. We will go on. We will pick up. Daniel, I'm picking up at verse 11. And he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly loved, understand the words I speak to you, and stand upright, for now I have been sent to you. Now, that right there makes it hard for this to be Jesus or God, because Jesus would speak for God. He doesn't get sent. He comes with God's message. And also, God nor Jesus in his heavenly form would not have Daniel to stand up. He would have Daniel to kneel. So that's one reason I don't think this is one of the Godhead. And and when he had spoken his words to me, I stood up trembling. He said to me, the angel, "Fear not, Daniel, for I am from the for for from the first day that you set your heart to understanding and humbled yourself before your God, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words. From the first day, this is just like the other prayer that Daniel prayed. God was sent, the messenger was coming before Daniel started praying. In the way here, the messenger was dispatched when Daniel started praying. But we got a problem. From the first day you set your heart to understanding and humbled yourself before your God, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words. Problem. The prince of the kingdom of Persia, withstood me for 21 days. But Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for um, for was left there with the king to help me, for I was left there with the kings of Persia. I've got my notes written all over where I can't even read the Bible. And came to make you understand what is to happen to your people in the latter days. There's the latter days. So there's a lot of things right there. For one, this angel was delayed because of the prince of the kingdom of Persia. Jesus nor God is going to be delayed by a prince of Persia. It's just not going to happen. So that's another reason I don't think a this is part of the Godhead. This is a messenger angel that has come. But look at there. At the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. How long was Daniel in mourning and fasting? The full 3 weeks. 3 weeks, 21 days. When Daniel started his fast and his prayers, he was fasting and praying for 21 days. The messenger was sent on that first day, but because he had to deal with the prince of Persia, he was delayed. But Daniel kept on praying because he knew that God would do something. God would tell him one way or the other, yes, no, or maybe. God would answer. He kept praying. And he kept praying, and good thing he did, because the messenger was just simply delayed by the prince of the kingdom of Persia. Now we are learning. It just so happens these things don't happen by accident. We are talking about, and Anthony talked about this Wednesday, about heavenly geography, sacred space. We know that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but we wrestle against principalities and powers. And these principalities and powers are explained in Genesis, and that's one of the things that we were talking about. The prince of Persia, when when Babel happened, when the Tower of Babel incidents happened, if you'll read in Genesis about Babel, and you read in Deuteronomy chapter 32, you see what happened at Babel. God had it with the evil that was in the world in the time of Noah. And it was time to reset. It was time to reset the world. It says, the thoughts of their minds were evil continually. Not just every now and then, not during the night, continually. And mankind had reached a point, and if you come to the Wednesday night, we will tell you why. Mankind had come to a point where it was irredeemable, and God had to act to clean the world. But as always, God has the grace to understand that there is a righteous person. There was a righteous person. It was Noah and his family. And God took the righteous person out as a remnant, saved them, and destroyed the evil in the world entirely, completely with the flood, and started over and repeated his covenant that he gave Adam and Eve: be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And what's the first thing that we did? We did not do that. Man, as the population grew, we stayed right there where the ark landed, right there in the Middle East, in the Shinar Valley. We stayed right there, and we got full of ourselves. And we thought, with a little help, and we know who the help came from, we thought once again, did God really say that? We thought we were better than we were. We thought that we had a better plan for the earth than God did. God said, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And we thought, this city is great. This city living is great. We're going to stay here. And once again, God had it with us. And instead of destroying, he punished. And he punished us by confounding the languages, dividing the humans up into groups that we called nations. And when you read in Genesis, the table of nations, that's what God divided us into, nations, and forced us to disperse. But in addition, in Deuteronomy 32, you see that God put in charge of each nation not people, but he put in charge some of the heavenly host. So your homework, Genesis 32, go read that. That tells you what's going on. It's also in Psalms 82, I think. He put in charge some of his heavenly host, some of the entourage that God travels with, angels.
What
When you
chapter?
I'm sorry,
And what chapter?
in Deuteronomy 32.
And Genesis?
In Genesis is chapter 6, and 6 is the beginning of the evil. And I can't remember right offhand Babel in Genesis. Does anybody remember right offhand where Babel is
I
in
can look it
Genesis?
up.
Yeah,
I
it's
can.
not.
Yeah.
It's probably single digit chapter. Noah and the
Okay.
flood, convergence, Tower of Babel, chapter 11.
Alrighty. Thank you.
Chapter 11.
Thank you.
when you see the term the Prince of, and we see it here, we see the Prince of Persia. We're also going to see the Prince of Greece, and there are other princes mentioned throughout prophecy. He's not talking about the king of Persia, because that's Cyrus. He would have told us right up there, third year of Cyrus, the king of Persia. He didn't mention Cyrus. He said the Prince of Persia. When you see that word, that Hebrew word Sar, prince, he's talking about a heavenly being. This is the angel that is in charge of Persia. That kingdom of Persia is not without an angel watching over it. The problem with this is that some of these angels, just like the first angel that got too big for his britches, some of these angels got a little bit prideful and decided they knew how to run the country better than God did, and they turned evil. So we aren't told whether the Prince of Persia, that angel, is an evil fallen angel or a regular angel. But for some reason, there was a misunderstanding, shall we say, between this angel that was going to Daniel, who is in Persia. There was a misunderstanding between these two, and there was a heavenly debate going on. And he was delayed. So, things that are, we think all this politics going on down here, there's politics going on in heaven too. God is running the world from heaven. And because we are still on this side of the second coming, there's still problems. So we're down to just a few minutes. I'm gonna drop right there. I'm gonna stop right there. We'll pick up with that second paragraph or third paragraph in chapter 10 next week. Do we have any questions before we end? We are starting to look at two things. We're starting to look at earthly conflicts, but in this prophecy, we're looking at heavenly conflicts too. So we're going to be looking at two different versions of the story. Things that happen on earth and things that are happening in the heavenlies, and things that have happened for us and that are going to happen. So our job is to untangle this and see if we can get a clear idea of what's going on. So any questions? If there's not, then thank you for your presence and attention, and we will pick it up next week.
Thank you, Norm. It was great.
Yep.
Good
Thank you
weekend,
very much.
everybody.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Have a great week, guys.